Good afternoon, and welcome to AIAGA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before I introduce today's presenter, a few quick reminders as always. Everyone that is registered for today's program will receive a copy by the end of next week. And if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the lower right side of your interface under the Q&A bar. Today, we welcome Steve Shannon. Steve is former VP of Marketing at Hyundai and is now an advisor at Podium. He's been in the auto industry for over 25 years and has a lot of knowledge to share when it comes to communicating with customers. So Steve, I'll let you take it away.
Terrific, Rachel. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and I am happy to be here and glad to be with you all. Well, there's no shortage of evidence about how complicated and challenging the retail auto business is. Quick shout out to dealers who during the pandemic took an amazing set of challenges and rose above and continued taking care of their customers, taking care of their employees, and selling and servicing. But if you even set the pandemic aside and you look at the rise of electric cars and autonomous cars and ride sharing and car sharing and robo taxis, boy, there's more complexity in our business, OEM incentives, more complexity than ever. But today I want to talk about something very simple. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so we're going to be very simple today, but yet very, very powerful. And that is, what is the best way today to communicate with customers? Simple, but very powerful. Here's what we're going to do. That's me. Really three things. I want to first, often when we talk about different marketing efforts or marketing tactics, it's great to first start with what does the customer say and what does the customer want? And then we'll talk a little bit about how do you best deliver on that. Let's just jump in first and we're going to turn first to the folks at JD Power. And I think they need no introduction. They implement two of the biggest customer surveys completely in automotive. Sales satisfaction measures about 28,000 people that bought a car, and CSI about 70,000 people that serviced. And in 2019, as part of these studies, we tried to understand three things because it's key that JD Power asks a couple key questions. First, what methods of communication between the customer dealer are preferred by customers, right? So what do customers want? Second, to what extent do dealers deliver on this customer preference? And then something that's really, really important and valuable is, what are the customer satisfaction implications of whether the dealer meets or doesn't meet that consumer preference? And let me just give you the hard ones here. After continued growth since 2015, texting is overwhelmingly preferred to phone calls and email. Don't call me because I don't recognize the number and I won't answer. Email I use for other things. Texting is preferred. Unfortunately, dealers seem to be lagging a little bit on that, and only in about 32% of cases where people want to text can they. But here's the key thing. For those dealers that do deliver on this preference, there's a significant increase in overall customer satisfaction for all brands. And look at these numbers. Mainstream brands saw an average lift of 26 points in SSI and 31 in CSI, and almost comparable in luxury. So for those who texted, have a better overall experience. Okay, that was all pre-pandemic. And what's great is we have some data now on whether those numbers changed or not, how they changed during COVID, in particular related to the whole rise in digital retailing. And here's what JD Power said. Decreased showroom traffic caused by COVID-19 shutdowns, fast-track dealer adoption of remote selling capabilities. Boy, you guys all know this. And it created a wide open path to allow different approaches to sell vehicles outside traditional. And key thing is the study what JD Power did during the pandemic, they made quite a few changes to really understand, and you'll see in a minute, in the 8 steps they identified in DR They got very granular in how it worked for each of those steps. But once again, they looked at what's the relationship between communication methods and digital retailing usage and satisfaction. And here was their overall conclusion. Key pandemic-related buying activities improve satisfaction. So, so DR improved satisfaction. Even though most buyers say COVID-19 affected their buying process, many were more satisfied as a result. And in particular, as you'll see in a minute, key steps like agree on price and completed paperwork activities saw the greatest improvement. So just a quick visual, and you guys are all living this, but these are 8 steps in the process that JD Power identified from the very beginning of doing a build and price, browsing inventory, selecting a vehicle, right down on through to completed the paperwork. So those are the steps we'll be looking at in a minute. One more just kind of foundational slide. If you look on the right side, the green, these are some key kind of functions within the dealership that were able to be measured. And you'll see in a minute, we're going to talk about a key one like that, dealership personnel, how texting affects the very good perception of dealer personnel. Okay, so a lot of words on this. I'll try to be simple. So for SSI, for people that bought a car during the pandemic period, text usage during shopping and purchase continued to increase, 25% for all customers, and among Gen and Y that represent 50% of the business, 32%. Higher than calling, higher than emailing. Second bullet, SSI validates customers who supplemented their digital retail experience with texting saw an improved customer experience. So that better customer experience we saw pre-pandemic has only been confirmed and accelerated during DR. As you'll see in a minute, in 5 of the 8 DR activities studied, and in 5 of the 6 categories, texting is associated with higher satisfaction. And texting is especially superior to calls and emails when it comes to things like dealer personnel and with the details of price negotiated. And we'll see that in a minute, which is really good to enable salespeople to sort of put on their best face. And it also increases satisfaction with the retailer's use of data ahead of time. We often may in our own life, we send information to a business, and when we talk to them again, it's like, wait a minute, did you forget that we talked and I gave you all this information? So this idea of my information being managed well later in the process was a significant improvement. So let's now take just a handful of slides to look at some numbers here, and these will be just quick. This chart simply plots over time the growth of texting. So there's that 31 and 32% I mentioned. Big jump from last year's 25%, especially among those 2 younger demos that are all our future car buyers. Here's a slide, and if you look across the bottom, we have those 8 DR steps, again from build and price on the left, all the way to complete paperwork. And a simple just look at the green. The green is for texting satisfaction, and the blue is for calling. And this is a measure in the personnel index of JD Power. But as you'll see in 6 of the 8 categories, texting drives a higher satisfaction level within the DR step than calling does. Now, some are close, admittedly, but in most cases, texting is preferred. And of course, you all know how much more efficient and quick texting is. Texts are opened almost instantaneously. Calling, you get somebody who's not available, you have to call back, you leave a voicemail. So it's better than in just about every case and much more efficient. Okay, here's another one. I mentioned the idea of the sort of looking at some different personnel, working out the deal, paperwork, the different steps in the process at the bottom. And we see once again in every case, green being texting, blue is calling, and yellow is emailing. Texting is superior in an overall satisfaction, whether I'm rating the dealer personnel, I'm rating how the dealership works out paperwork, works out the deal, or does the delivery process. Texting wins. I think the jury's in. Texting wins. Just a couple more. I mentioned earlier, there's an overall bucket within the study called dealer personnel. This gives you some idea of what some of the individual questions are that people are checking off. And here's a couple in particular I want to focus your attention on in yellow: respect for your time and transparency. So these are people, if I'm a consumer and I'm filling out this survey, I am giving your personnel much higher marks for when the person texts. So you see that 8.82 versus 8.71, 11 points higher. And folks, that is a meaningful difference, meaningful superiority. And I'm just showing you two examples there: respect for time and transparency. Okay, just two more, and then we'll go on. Here's a case where across the bottom, once again, we have, in this case, 6 steps in the DR process. Here they did something interesting. People visited your website. They, in fact, visited your dealer. But in each of the cases, they augmented that. The green is augmenting it with texting, the blue with calling, and the green with emailing. So this is sort of the cocktail of they communicated you indirectly, and they came in and they went to your website. Once again, texting gives you that extra boost of satisfaction over and above calling and emailing. So pretty clear here, folks. One final one that I think is quite interesting, and I think you'll all important to know and will appreciate. We looked at the price paid per vehicle based on the way in which those consumers communicated. And the first one, the set of bars on the left side, are all customers. And you can see there the green bar, 43,120. That's the average price paid. So that's higher than calling, emailing, visiting the website, or visiting a dealership. But take a look at the right-hand side. These are people who completed all of the steps in the digital retail process. Now, admittedly, that's not a ton today, right? Some people are doing 1 or 2 steps. There aren't a lot of people yet doing all 8 steps, but those that do, look at that huge advantage in price paid. Now, of course, that's probably not causal. Texting doesn't make you pay more. But I think equally as important is the kind of people who are texting are likely demographically more educated, higher income. They're just paying more for a vehicle. So here's yet another way. Boy, if you know the people that are texting with you, take good care of them because they're going to pay more for their vehicle. Okay, so to belabor things, pretty simple. If we can all agree that we want to communicate with people in the way in which they want to communicate, that's a good thing, and that drives higher satisfaction. Well, why is that? I mean, I think a lot of us probably know it's easier, it's less intrusive, it saves time. We know that texts are opened up much more frequently. 90% plus of people open texts, and it's a smaller percentage for emails. It eliminates that brutal telephone tag back and forth when either I won't answer the phone or I leave a voicemail. And of course, we'll talk in a minute about the dealer benefits of the time savings. So lots of consumers want to text, and there's lots of reasons for doing it. Let's now talk about, okay, if that's what people want and that's why, let's talk a little bit, I guess, about the how. And here I'll talk about the company I work for, Podium, but there are others that do this. But let's just talk about this idea of a single string of messages in one simple inbox. I mean, think about the opposite of this, which is you have salespeople and they're at different points in time. They're calling with somebody, they're emailing with somebody, they're texting with somebody. There is no single source of truth of all the communications with customer Steve Shannon. But if I'm somebody that wants to text every communication I've had with you, either about a sale or every communication I've had with you about service, is in one place. And the ability for you as the dealer to know all the thread is in one place, the ability to have features like to send that thread to your boss or to send it over to service, enormously powerful and valuable for the dealer. Let's talk about now. Okay, so I believe you, Steve. I believe that's what customers want. I believe in the dealer benefits of that sort of more efficient and single view. What can I do with it now? And it's a range of things. Setting appointments, right? Somebody's looking at a new Sonata. Can you come in tomorrow? Um, Answering specific product questions. Do you have this or that? Is it available in red? Communications about business hours. Requesting payments, right? If the pandemic showed us everything, it's the ability to take a payment and not have people come in. Certainly collecting reviews, soliciting reviews, and running promotional campaigns. Here's a significant thing we're going to talk about in a minute, which is the ability to actually solicit, sales messages, service messages, significant benefits in things like that. Okay, let's talk now about what I just mentioned, which is this idea of being able to use it as a marketing tool. I mean, if you think about all of the platforms you use today, when it's either a sales event time, when there are Camrys that are $249 a month, or you think about times when you're doing an oil change kind of special. You think about all the different your website, all of your direct advertising, all of your digital advertising, right? You're communicating this in lots of different ways. Texting is now provided, and I think with platforms like Podium that do everything possible to make sure that you are, TCPA compliant. The value that a platform has like this, as you build a text campaign, you can, build and manage an opt-in list legally and confidently, and to have one whole extra new channel now, right? A new channel to deliver promotional messages that have all those virtues we talked about earlier about being, read more often, open more quickly, sort of short and sweet. Mr. Jones, the car you've been looking at is now $249 a month. Come in, or we're now doing an oil change special, or winter is coming. Come in and get your winter checkup, what have you. Is just really, really kind of important. So yeah, so I got through that kind of quickly. Maybe just to recap and chat a little bit more. So it's the world is just changed, and people want a very efficient, very short, very terse way of communicating. I'll give one little anecdote. I'm doing some sort of vicarious shopping for a early 2000s Corvette, and so I'm often sending either through Auto Trader, or I'm live chatting with the dealer, and it's dramatic, the range of different sort of behaviors, some good, some not so good. Some of which is I'll really encourage the dealer, hey, text me. That's the best way to reach me. Sometimes that's observed, sometimes it's not. Um, Sometimes I'm getting a call and an email and maybe a text, and I'm kind of wondering about, I've asked a question and I'm not sure where that question is, and do they know whether they've answered it or not, because they're trying to sell me the vehicle and don't know yet if they've answered a key question for me. You think about that, having a single thread, but if I'm getting notes from people from three different channels, how can they possibly have the single source of knowledge? So I've had a chance, sort of as a customer, in kind of real time, to be able uh, to to to, uh, to sense that. So yeah, so I think we talked the consumer spoken, and and dealers, as I said, are lagging a little bit on meeting that need, and the sooner that can happen, the better. I'll also mention that the rise of other, whether it's Facebook Messenger or whether it's Google Messenger, lots of other channels that all eventually can be turned into an SMS, explosion in these channels that allow uh, just a much more seamless, better communication. So, yeah, with that, I'm going to just pause for a second. We have a question or two maybe coming in. I guess one thing that sometimes is asked about is sort of how does the actual onboarding work, and one thing that Podium has done that I think is pretty important to talk about is they have a program, and I think it's called Starter. They may have renamed it by now, but it's almost a freemium product. So if you're a dealer, and I mean, they offer basically a no cost way to try this out. Now, it is limited somewhat in the total number of communications per month, but it's enough that any dealer, almost of any size, can get a chance to basically kick the tires. And Podium does a great job with training and with a whole onboarding and training. Training is pretty easy to do. One of the real virtues of their dashboard is it's surprisingly easy to use. You have in your in your BDCs and other place, um, a, a lot of things people need to learn, and I would say that Podium is not going to be one of those that you say, wait a minute, time out. I'm kind of full up. So yeah, and let's go back. Just let me go back too for one more second. I think we're going to maybe post on here in a minute the link to Starter, but I think DR is here to stay, right? The data pretty much shows customers like it. I think safe to say there was a heroic effort in the last 12 months as dealers and OEMs and platforms like Roadster and CarNow. They existed before, but the scramble everybody did to stand up programs where people can buy online, it's here to stay. And the key thing to think about is within those steps, communication is going to be necessary. People are going to be involved in one of the steps, and they're going to sort of figuratively want to raise their hand and say, I have a question. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Or I'm not sure how to do this. I need to talk to somebody at the dealership. And once again, as the data showed, texting is the way that is going to be the most efficient for people to just text the dealer when I'm in a certain step, is this car available, or I'm doing this paperwork. One other thing I'll mention too is that looking back at one of the slides we looked at, if you happen to notice the two places where the superiority of texting was the highest, one is that fourth from the right, agreed on vehicle purchase price. And the other one was the very last one, which is completed purchase paperwork. Well, you all know this, but it's to restate it's probably no coincidence that the two steps in the DR process that are the biggest pain point for customers, right? What are those things that if you survey a customer, what do you not like buying about a car? One is the anxiety, right? The challenge in negotiating and agreeing on price, right? And the other one is how darn long it takes to buy a car. And I'm taking as a proxy how darn long it takes to buy a car with completing all the paperwork, right? And so frankly, if we could, in our wildest dreams, if we could imagine how this would be, we would have the most amount of benefit for the customer in those two places. And so what this is showing is within DR, within those two aspects of the process, texting delivers its biggest benefit. So that's huge. That's really big. So I think we're going to wrap. There are no further questions. I appreciate everybody's time. I hope my opening of this is simple but powerful was met. Podium.com, and just to reiterate, Starter is a great way to get in and just try it out, kick the tires. You'll get some good training and onboarding. So with that, I want to thank you all, and we hope this chip shortage is behind us soon. I know you're all selling down and trying to keep, especially your salespeople, motivated in an environment where, when I visited a Toyota store and asked about a Highlander hybrid, the great salesperson almost laughed and said there wouldn't be some for a couple more months. But good luck, everyone, and good selling, and thank you for joining us.
Steve, thanks so much for all the insights today. We really appreciate it. Again, everyone that is registered for today's webinar will be receiving a copy by the end of next week. This was our last webinar for the summer, but we'll be back in September with an amazing lineup for you all, so be sure to be on the lookout for promotions. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for joining us, and have a great summer, everyone.